Like most people, I was delightfully surprised at the announcement of Evil Dead, the game. During the pandemic, I had racked up roughly about 1,300 hours playing Dead by Daylight, and given the growing issues and slow decline of that game, the prospect of a competitor excited me. Well, I've had a few hours to try out Evil Dead and want to give my first impressions after playing a dozen or so matches. There are many aspects of this game that I have yet to explore more thoroughly, but in my short time with it, I've been able to identify some of the major pros and cons. The core of Evil Dead is as a multiplayer 4v1 asymmetric experience. You can either play as one of 4 survivors on a team, with a character roster ranging from the movies and TV show, or as the Evil Dead itself. As a survivor, your objective is to locate map pieces and ancient relics to banish the evil. As the Kandarian Demon, you must stop this ritual from being completed and destroy the Necronomicon. You can do this by flying around the map, setting traps, summoning demons, and possessing objects, summons, and even players. The early game resembles battle royales as each side scavenges for items. Survivors can loot buildings and crates in order to find weapons and supply items, while the demon collects orbs to build up points. These points are then used to activate various abilities and summon monsters. I like the idea of this phase a lot because each character has unique traits, proficiencies, and abilities. Because you're on a race against time, you have to make the tactical call of whether it's best to spend more time scavenging or racing to complete early objectives. Likewise, you can choose to split up tasks or tackle objectives as a team. The demon can only be in one place, but catching someone off guard can be the difference between victory and defeat. When a survivor is downed, an ally must come to the rescue and pick them up. If they bleed out though, they aren't out of the game just yet. An ally can collect their soul and bring it to a special altar to grant them a second chance at life. However, taking any damage cancels and resets these actions, so it can be tricky trying to juggle a horde of enemies while saving your friends. Each side can level up during the match. For the Kandarian Demon, they must increase their threat level to obtain access to and improve their abilities and summons. At the start you are harmless and can do little to nothing but set traps. Eventually though, you can invest points to summon basic units, brutes, and even bosses. The game is designed so that you can build up a snowball effect. If you play your cards right, by the endgame you'll have access to powerful demonic powers that can quickly change the tide of battle. As for the survivors, they can pick up points by looting crates, and can then spend them to improve melee and ranged attacks, health, and more. Depending on which character you choose, there will be specific stats you'll want to focus on. For example, I like to play Henry the Red, who is heavily melee focused. Spending points on ranged attacks is a bit of a waste of time for him, but not for Kelly, who is proficient with guns. Each character also has a unique special ability that complements their style. Henry, for example, can become especially tanky and soak up extra damage in dire situations. On top of all this, every character has their own skill tree that you can explore between matches. Using a character will grant them skill points, but what's great is that the point score based on your performance in matches can then be used as a sort of universal currency to buy extra skill points for any character of your choice. Evil Dead rewards time and commitment with a wide depth of upgrades, which is nice as everyone familiarizes themselves with the game and tailors their characters based on their playstyles. So a basic match goes as follows. The survivors spawn as a group in one of several locations on the map. The Kandarian Demon spawns in a distant location and has no idea where the survivors are. They're only clued in if either the survivors make a lot of noise or they happen to be nearby. Each side spends a few minutes scrambling to loot, find items, and level up. The first main objective for survivors is to find 3 hidden map pieces. The game gives a general sector to search, but players must comb through the area to locate them. The demon is unaware of these locations, but knows where the second set of objectives are. So the choice becomes, do they immediately try to find the survivors and torment them, or start setting up traps for phase 2? Once the 3 map pieces have been found, survivors must retrieve both the missing pages of the Necronomicon, as well as the Kandarian dagger. Icons to these items appear on the HUD, so there's no guesswork involved in finding them. However, to obtain them, survivors must defend the area for a few minutes. If they are forced to retreat, they must try again. Typically as the Kandarian Demon, you want to trap the area with portals that spawn enemy units. Along the path to these destinations are opportunities for the demon to set additional traps. Nearby trees can suddenly lunge at survivors, or crates can deliver nasty surprises, so as the demon it's fun to anticipate where survivors might be coming from and catch them off guard. After the dagger and pages have been retrieved, the stage for the final battle is set up. The playfield begins to shrink as the survivors race towards the last objective. Players must defeat 3 colossal demons defending the Necronomicon. If they aren't prepared, things can turn quite quickly. Upon success, they must defend the book for a few minutes. In a last-ditch attempt for the Kandarian Demon to win, they can either kill the survivors or destroy the Necronomicon to avoid being banished. This entire process is quite daunting at first, but after a few games the routine begins to kick in.
The humans have completed the map. Locate their souls and swallow at will.
The real issues with this game thus far are threefold in my opinion. While the tutorials are alright, they fail to adequately explain a lot of the game. You have to figure out a lot of things on your own, and that can be frustrating. Until I figured out that the game hinted at the areas of the map pieces, I was running around like a chicken with its head cut off. And it wasn't just me. The first few teams I worked with were similarly confused. The second major issue is the lack of communication and synergy between strangers. Sometimes you're lucky and get teamed up with people who understand that victory requires cooperation, but other times you'll get those who think of themselves as one-man armies and doom everyone by selfishly running towards the objectives alone. The game has a fear mechanic and penalizes players who stray too far from others, but it doesn't do enough to fix the issue. That being said, this is something all multiplayer games struggle with. It's just unfortunate because this game is built around collaboration, so once someone breaks that, chaos ensues. One thing I find odd is that players can't drop and share items. If a teammate is low on health and I'm stocked up with healing items, it's dumb that I can't toss one to them. Perhaps I'm overlooking something, but I checked the controls and nothing was mentioned in this regard. The best you can do is ping items, but that's not really helpful unless everyone's together, and even then you have to hope that an ally doesn't get greedy and snag it for themselves. The third major issue regards moving around the environment. There's a dedicated vault mechanic, but that only applies to windows and fences. There's no jump button, so if you encounter a half-foot wall, you have to walk around. There are certain areas that if you accidentally fall into, it's the biggest pain to run around for 30 seconds trying to find an exit. Accounting for this and adding the ability to scale small steps would be great. Other than that, there are a few bugs, but I guess that's to be expected when a new multiplayer game is stress tested upon launch. I only experienced one horrible bug as the Kandarian Demon, where for about 50% of the match my HUD disappeared, and I lost access to about 90% of my abilities. I had to watch as the survivors trampled me, furiously mashing buttons to see if something might happen. I got lucky in spawning a boss, and the HUD reappeared in time for me to salvage the match. But, you know, this only happened once. Overall, I really dig Evil Dead because I see the great potential. Dead by Daylight was getting pretty stale for me due to a lack of variety. If you've played the game, currently it's plagued with constant disconnects. If the killer hits someone in the first 30 seconds of a match, they just simply give up and screw everyone else over. What I appreciate about Evil Dead is that it mixes things up on several levels so that regardless of whether you win or lose, the experience still feels rewarding. The tide can turn at any point, so there's always a sense of tension. By giving multiple opportunities for victory, it can be fun to win the war after losing several battles. It's a pleasant back and forth. I guess it's a lot more similar to the Friday the 13th game, which is ironic given Evil Dead's release date. Despite that game being pretty much dead due to licensing issues that are in limbo, you can tell how much fun people still have playing it to this day. Evil Dead seems to capture that spirit and iterates on it by combining ideas from different games and placing a heavy emphasis on action. So if you don't mind the current Epic Game Store exclusivity on PC, I highly recommend that you check it out. Sure, it's a little janky in spots, but it's clear that there's a lot of love that went into making this. And if you're a fan of the franchise, it's really hard to pass up.
Humanity's last hope. Broken, beaten, and bleeding. Pathetic.